Poke the Bear is brought to you by Prize Picks and the Game Time app.
And welcome into Poke the Bear episode 293, presented by Prize Picks. Go use that promo code CLNS to get $50 back when you play just $5, and we're presented by Game Time. Go use that promo code CLNS to get $20 off that first purchase. Terms apply. I am Evan Marinofsky. That is Conor Ryan. Connor, what is up?
Evan, I'm back. I'm not in California. As you can tell by my wardrobe, it's pretty fucking cold here. But I'm doing well. How you doing?
Doing great. Doing great. You've got to be frigid upon arrival, I can imagine.
Yes.
Oh, it is
Not
awful
great.
outside. Oh my God, is it bad? Cold, windy. I mean, it could be worse, but this is pretty bad. It's pretty cold. I will say, though, good. I mean, hopefully it stays like this so the ponds can freeze. That wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. But
True.
It is way too cold outside. But next year, if fans want to get out of the cold, February 1st, 2026, seems like eons away, over a year away, Bruins will head down to Tampa to play at Raymond James Stadium for a Stadium Series game, which we talked about the Winter Classic like a week or two ago, and we mentioned maybe the Bruins will play the Panthers. Turns out they'll play the Lightning a month later. I like this. Good matchup. I'm very curious to see what the ice is like and what it's like outdoors down there. But I'm in. I like this. What about you?
Yeah, no, I agree. I think what we talked about last week, right, was the fatigue of the same old stadiums, the same teams. I say that as the Bruins get ready for their sixth outdoor game. I know that. But I think in terms of generating interest, whether it's the Bruins and Tampa, who obviously have a rivalry, Florida, the Florida Panthers obviously get the Winter Classic game against the Rangers. It's clear the NHL is trying to switch things up a little bit and make it interesting. And as much as I think you get the skepticism as to Florida as a hockey market, or how the ice is going to be, what have you, it adds intrigue, right? Like this game, these games every year should have something unique about them, of pushing the boundaries of what the league can do, how to attract more fans. As like you said, Evan, with they'll never do it again probably, but like those outdoor games where there's not like a seating capacity or anything like that. But if you had a game at Lake Louise up in Banff or something like that, how cool it'd be and how much that would generate headlines. Like having this last one be, New Year's, before New Year's in Chicago with a really crappy Blackhawks team in the middle of bowl games. Like, I don't know how it's going to branch out and make you the NHL, which is already nowhere close to being the top dog in terms of just the sports zeitgeist, sports discourse. Like, I think going to Florida and changing those things around makes it interesting. So I'm excited. I'll be down there, I'm sure, with my little sunscreen, little Hawaiian shirt, see how cold it actually does get. Unlike the Panthers, who are at least playing like in an indoor stadium where the Marlins play. Curious to see if all of a sudden we have an unseasonably 65-degree day in Tampa in February. We'll see what happens.
I was going to say, what if it's like slush? I mean, what if it's hot out? But I like it. Battle the elements a little bit. Not typically the elements you face playing hockey in the winter, but I'm for it. I'm just disappointed that they couldn't play it at Tropicana Field. That's really...
unfortunately, that ballpark's in a little bit of rough shape these days.
Yeah. They should just play it at the field without the roof.
They straight up don't have a roof, so...
I know, exactly. Let all the, just like a dome without a roof. So, but good, good to see the Bruins in it. They definitely have not played nearly enough outdoor games. So,
no,
they finally give one to the Bruins. So, hopefully the Bruins are better next year than they are this year. Oh boy, that game against Edmonton on Tuesday night, 4-0 loss, felt a lot worse than a 4-0 game. My biggest take from this game was it was like watching an A team play like a B team, where it's like clearly the other team is better. There is such a gap between the two. What did you take away from it?
Yeah, I mean, just uncompetitive, right? I think that's probably the best way to put it. Bruins just looked completely outclassed in that one. And, they've had these, this stretch where you've lost 5 straight, 6 of 7, where, they've had games that are frustrating, whether it's, the Islanders game where they come back, lose in overtime, the games against the Capitals and Rangers early on where that lack of scoring, sprouts up and they can't get that equalizing goal to get back in the game. You've had games like Toronto where they finally break through. David Pastrnak has kind of a takeover game, and you feel good about that. And then the defense implodes. This one was, I think I mentioned last week, right, that it felt like whack-a-mole of like one thing can't be, if it's not one thing, it's the other. This game on Tuesday was everything falling apart. And it is probably the most stock view yet of a team that just looks like it's not in the same tier, the same class as teams like the Oilers. And now you go into this road trip against both the Lightning and the Panthers where, it's going to be critical for this team in terms of, trying to right the ship, because if the Bruins play like they did on Tuesday, moving forward, they're going to be in the same boat of just completely uncompetitive games. Because I think you can view Tampa as a legit team in terms of just their firepower, their star power, what they can do out there. Vasilevsky, I know he's not maybe been prime Vasilevsky the last year or two, but still is a guy that pretty damn good. He's got the credentials. And then we know what Florida has done to this team over the last couple of years. So if they play like they did on Tuesday moving forward, they're going to get their ass kicked. And it's going to be critical for this team to see what they can do to try to get out of this. But if they continue to play like this going into these games against Florida, it's probably all the validation we need, right, Evan, of looking at this team as maybe they are what they are, which is just a pedestrian team that maybe they sneak into the wild card, but maybe they're going to be out of the playoff picture entirely because they've done little to kind of show that they deserve a spot once the calendar gets into late April.
I keep going back to, if the rest of the East wasn't bad, wasn't underperforming as well, I think the Bruins are at most like the second wild card, maybe out of it. Like, that's my thing. And like, Tampa still has way less games than you. So at some point they're going to catch up. So you fall into the wild card teams and you probably stay there. Cause like Columbus is hovering around there. Do they stay there? I don't know. The Rangers should be near the top of the Metro and they're near the bottom of the league. That's a whole nother story. Like, you have all these teams sort of underperforming, Pittsburgh, and, the Bruins probably do sneak into the playoffs at the end of the day, but I don't know how you can look at the last 5 games, whole season, and think, man, that's a playoff team. Like, that's a playoff team, because they just haven't been at all. And I think the last 5 games have really shown it, where they've lost 1-goal games to non-playoff teams. Competitive games, they came back against the Islanders, still lost in OT. Rangers, put up a fight, but lost. And then you get smacked around by the Caps. Your defense implodes against the Leafs, and everything implodes against Edmonton. And I think that, to me, is like that's sort of the season in a nutshell, where it's like you are not on the same level as the playoff perennial contenders. You just are not. And you saw that on Tuesday night. Oh my God, did you see it? You saw it. And I mean, they didn't control a second of that game. The third line was your best line. You mentioned whack-a-mole. That was the mole that stayed down. That's the mole that's been up that decided to stay down. And like, fans are sick of it. Us as media are sick of it, because, not only are they like middle of the pack, like right around average to below average, they're also boring. There's nothing really to bite into with this team. You just have like, the young guys aren't up, which we'll get to in a bit. So there's not that storyline to follow. And it's a lot of guys just underperforming. A lot of guys just missing the mark. And, I think that's why you heard fans upset, booing them. I mean, that power play is awful. That first unit is atrociously bad. Worst it's been all year. Like, unable to enter the zone, consistently giving up chances the other way. Second unit's been better. Like, second unit, you've actually had like a little bit of sustained time. And you hear fans booing, you hear fans chanting "Fire Sweeney." I get why people are pissed. I get it.
Yeah. And I think it, as you kind of said, it's not just the baseline results, right? Like, this team could be playing kind of that boring system that we've mentioned before of like how the Islanders under Trotz were, and stack up wins. And I think people could be like, Hey, if you're winning, who gives a shit? Ask fans in New Jersey if they gave a shit how they won 3 cups, right? Like, doesn't matter if you're winning. Don't look at Islanders fans in 21 where they pushed Tampa to the brink. That wasn't
Yeah.
the most riveting team, but who gives a
Nope.
shit if you're playing into a late May, early June? But yeah, I think it's just the fact that the product is so bland right now. There's nothing really to get excited about. And there's also nothing worse than like being completely middle of the pack and middling, right? Like maybe, how do you get fans excited when the product itself is not good? It's not like this is a team that's scoring a bunch of goals, but they're giving up a whole bunch down the other end of the ice. It's not a team that, is locking things down in grade A ice recently. Like you look at these last couple of games against the Oilers and the Islanders and Toronto, haven't done that. Special teams is bad. Like there's not like it's not like the Bruins, even before Montgomery got here, where they were kind of middle of the pack, if not, 20th at 5-on-5 scoring, but they had a top 5 power play, so you could rely on that and get that entertainment. There's nothing there. And we'll talk about the young prospects and the lack of juice there in terms of getting fans excited for just seeing what new blood can provide this team. You're just kind of stuck in neutral right now. And it's like, are you expecting them to add at the deadline? I don't think so. They shouldn't, right? Like that's the whole thing. It's like if this was the last couple of years, you'd be like, all right, they got to do something at the deadline to add a guy. But after doing that year after year after year where you've given up first round picks, this probably is not the year to do it. I think we all agree on that. So fans can't look forward to that. They can't look forward to, the product on the ice where you're seeing the same old things, the same old flaws. Going into Thursday's game, I think a lot of fans are probably expecting some moves on Wednesday. Same lines on Wednesday as it was on Tuesday. No call-ups or anything like that. And it almost feels like you're getting, I think, the most dangerous thing with a fan base, which is apathy. Or just like, all right, well, I guess it's just what it is. Like, that's not what you want. Like, you can have pissed off Bruins fans, which is par for the course. Bruins fans are very passionate. They get pissed very easily.
Oh,
but when
very
it's
easily.
when the product is middling like this and doesn't seem like there's any solution or any urgency to fix things, all right, then why should they get invested? If you're not gonna call up the young guys to at least see what you have, why are we watching the same old product when it's the same guys that are dragging their feet every day? Like, as much as it's been a frustrating year, when the urgency and the lack of vision, the lack of identity isn't there, why should fans buy in? And I think that is the kind of the question you have to face right now if you're the Bruins, because that inactivity is just having you stuck in the worst place you could be, which is just a neutral, boring, middling product, and it ain't fun.
It isn't. I mean, I remember early this year. I think I mentioned this on the podcast. I took my girlfriend to the Bruins and Stars back in like October. And that was like the Stars just dominated for 60 minutes. It wasn't close. And it's like, this is not worth money. Like this is awful. This is unwatchable. But you want to make the games a little more watchable, Connor? Got to go to our friends over at Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the best place to get real money sports action. With over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings, Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 1,000 times your cash. Run your game all season long on Prize Picks. It's playoff time, and it's now or never. Don't miss out on the last few weeks of football action with Prize Picks, the best place to win cash while watching the playoffs. Big weekend this weekend for the NFL. Saturday and Sunday playoff games all day. Make it more fun with Prize Picks. Feeling Lamar Jackson doing something big, maybe going more yards. Got to go do that over at Prize Picks. And again, Prize Picks offers MasterCard for quick and easy deposits into your account this sports season. Bruins-wise, Pasternak's been producing. I'll give you that. I'm a bigger one. And nothing's changing, so Charlie McAvoy's still getting a ton of time on ice. So that's another one if you want to do. So you can go to Prize Picks for that. So download the app today and use code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Again, download the app today and use code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game. So for the first time all season, there was a Fire Sweeney chant at the Garden. Again, like pretty surprising. Granted, I said this to Haggs on not Poke the Bear, on Pucks with Haggs. I said it's like Twitter came to life and they just all filtered into the building. Yes,
like Skynet.
Exactly. I'm not at the point of firing Don Sweeney. I'm not there yet. I think he's done a fairly good job over the last couple years. I think internally it's going to take a lot for them to fire the GM. I think it gets into, they missed the playoffs once or twice. They're hamstrung by contracts, which I think that is very realistic. The draft stuff comes back to bite you. But I get why people want change, because there's no change being made on the ice. As you said, the lines are the same. And I'm for keeping lines together. I'm for giving guys time to have chemistry. But when you've lost 5 in a row and there are lines that clearly are not producing or haven't been producing, such as that third line, which Brazeau will score every now and again, which is nice. But Wahlstrom hasn't really given you anything points-wise. Frederick hasn't given you anything points-wise. You're just kind of bringing out the status quo every night. I get why people are pissed and want change.
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of what, we just said, where the product on the ice just is what's there to be excited about right now. Yes, you have star players on this team. How many of them are living up to their billing right now between Pasternak, McAvoy, Swayman, all these guys? Not doing that well, and you look at the lack of, the identity and I think the long-term outlook of this team. It'd be one thing if this team had played, had already started, playing Lysell and Merkulov and all these guys, and people were getting a look at them and seeing what they could do, and they were failing. Let's say, there's no guarantee that when you hope, inevitably call up Poitras and Lysell and Merkulov, and I think probably Lysell and Merkulov had the more of the question marks there, but if they're up here for 10, 15 games and don't show anything, then at least But if Bruins fans who have been watching the same product on the ice, the same milquetoast, identity, the same guys that are dragging their feet and aren't producing, of course they want to see these young guys play. I think Ty Anderson mentioned it before. There's been a couple of games now where the Bruins, again, have been playing uninspired, bad hockey to the same, the same cast of characters. And on Twitter, the trending topics are Lysell and Poitras. Bruins fans aren't stupid. I think Bruins fans are realistic when stuff doesn't go their way. I've seen quite a lot of people amid this team sucks, this, what the hell's going on here, being if this ain't our year, let's make the most of it in terms of either trading off pieces and doing kind of what the Caps did, which is retooling on the fly, or seeing what the young guys can do. And I think if you sell that, I remember, was it 2 years ago where Charlie Jacobs was you can't sell this market on a rebuild. And again, there is a fine line, not even a fine line. There is a difference between a rebuild and a retool. Rebuild of trading away foundational pieces can fall, you can fall into the same trap as Red Wings and those teams. Don't want that. But you very easily could retool this team, in a year or two and stay kind of in the mix of kind of what you're doing right now, which if you told the Bruins fans, hey, we're going to trade pieces, get, stockpile draft picks, add to our prospect pipeline. If you pitch that for Bruins fans and next year they're still in the mix, they're a 90-point team. Maybe they make the playoffs, maybe they don't. But you see the progress. You see a guy like Letourneau, who's had his growing pains, have another good, have a good year at BC next year. A guy you have in the first round this year lights it up in the WHL, what have you. I think you can sell Bruins fans on that if it's a 1 or 2 year retool, if it leads to what the Caps are now, where all of a sudden they've got guys that they gave a chance on producing. You've got guys that have rebounded. And what do you know? You got Ryan Leonard coming in, in this spring for the Capitals team, which is horrifying. And again, it's not to say the Bruins are going to plummet and have a top 10 pick.
That's right. He's going to be there in the spring.
Yeah. So, and it's not to say the Bruins are going to plummet like that. And all of a sudden, I forget where Leonard went. 7th overall, is that where he was? Which is 8th, which is already crazy that he fell that far. But I don't know if the Bruins are going to have a top 10 pick, but I think doing that and if it's a not rebuilding but retooling on the fly, I think you can sell Bruins fans on that. It's all about just committing to it if this team just doesn't have what it takes. And right now, has there been anything that's proven that they have what it takes or they're due to break out? I don't think so.
This is why all year I've said a retool is what this team needs. That's what this team needs more than anything. And, you look at the lineup, you look at the roster, you look at who is a UFA going into next year, and you just look at the future of this team. I mean, we talked about this at the time, and I don't begrudge the Bruins for signing him because he was the best center available. But Elias Lindholm has missed every mark. I mean, completely. And at age 30, that contract is already looking bad. We thought, all right, year 4, year 5, that's when you'll start to see him regress a little bit, but you will have gotten good play out of him for those first 4 years. And in that time, Letourneau and other prospects can become your real number 1 centers, and you'll be okay. He looks like a number 3 center most nights. And I think that's a really scary thing. And that he has a no move. Like you can't trade him unless he waives that. Like you can't just deal him. So that's off the table. Zadorov, another thing, like that contract, not saying that's going to hamstring you, but like that hasn't looked great so far. He's been on and off as McAvoy's guy on the left side. And like, I think that's sort of where Sweeney is going to feel the pressure. Like if they are stuck with a bunch of guys who have no moves or modified no trades and they can't get deals done that are going to help them asset wise, like that's why people are so, big on trade Trent Frederick. Because you can deal Frederick to freaking anywhere because he doesn't have protections. If you wanted to trade Carlo or Coyle, even they have protections. Even they have 10-team no-trade lists. So, like, that's the thing where, like, I think Sweeney is safe for now. But if in a year, if they miss the playoffs this year and then they're, really in no better position next year, there's not a clear vision for the future of, hey, we're dealing guys, we're getting picks. That's when I think he really starts to feel the pressure. And I know people say, just get him out now. Get him out now. It's not what stable organizations do, where you just fire the general manager in January, like it, A. And B, it's not his fault that they crap the bed in the 23 playoffs. Like, no, it isn't. It isn't.
He did everything possible to put that team over the top. That is the players and honestly some bad coaching decisions that
correct.
He put them 4 tiers over the top in terms of how deep that team was.
Yes.
It's not, and that doesn't absolve him from the mistakes this year, the lack of drafting, all those things. Like, and it goes back to what we said about just like the dearth of talent on this team in terms of young talent. Like, remember how excited Bruins fans were, like after 2 kind of tough seasons in 15 and 16 of like that 17-18 year where you had McAvoy and DeBrusk and Anders Bjork, who is viewed as a top prospect, but like, there was reasons to be excited about where that team was at. Dan Heinen, who had like almost 50 points as a rookie, like you felt that optimism. I mean, again, granted, you were also elevated by a core that still had, Bergeron at 32, right? Krejci 33, Marchand, like you still had a really good core.
Chara was there, Raz.
Yeah, but you still this is a Bruins team or a Bruins fan base that gets excited when you have a vision for the future. And right now, it's like you're putting all your eggs in the basket of like a guy like Letourneau, which isn't fair for a guy like that. That is a project and is going to be a couple years away anyway. I've already seen people like look at his elite prospect stat line and start shitting on the poor guy when he's already a year ahead of where he should be. And we knew this was going to happen, but
I thought we prepped people well enough, but I don't think we have.
But
I'm not saying he's going to be great, by the way, but don't judge him until 3 or 4, 3 years at least down the line.
But when you're that barren in terms of the blue chip or intriguing prospects you have, like it all puts the pressure on one of these, guys. So I do think this team desperately does need an injection of young talent, whether it's this year with guys like Lysell, Patra, Merkulov, what have you, and then moving forward. And I think it comes down to knowing what you have on this team, being realistic about it, and then, committing to adding young talent, whether that's trading off pieces, whether that's keeping your first round pick and doing that. It's the best way to retool on the fly when you still have, impact players on this roster right now.
That's the thing I think is like, if, and they're not going to come out and say it, but at this deadline, right? Like, I think people would be fine if they dealt off pieces. I'm not saying, McAvoy and Pasternak. I'm saying like Frederick. And, do you entertain like a Coyle, which I don't want to do. We'll get into like leadership things in a bit, but like, I think he fills I think he's a legitimate leader in that room. But like, a guy like that? You know, do you listen on Brandon Carlo? Like, do you try to recoup picks and make them at this draft, at the next draft? And so the next 2 or 3 years, you make all your picks. That's the thing. Like, I think you're seeing the chickens come home to roost in that the last bunch of drafts, they've only had 4 or 5 picks. They haven't made a lot of first round picks. So you're right. You miss on all this high talent. You miss on it completely. And I think they have. They don't have a lot of high end talent in the system. So this is what you're seeing. And we've talked about this for years. When you look at like free agency, the way you supplement your core with Pasternak and McAvoy and Swayman is not through free agency. You can get some good, complementary third or fourth line pieces in free agency for sure. But core guys, like Elias Lindholm's now part of your core, and his numbers are not good. Yeah. Nikita Zadorov, has been better since Sacco took over, but even that is like, what's the future there? So I want to continue on this, especially with the young guys stuff. But first, if you want to go to the game, if you want to go to the Bruins, which now might be the time because tickets are going to get cheaper. So now might be the time. Go visit our friends over at Game Time. No better place to make incredible memories with fellow friends, fans, enemies than Game Time. Going to a game, taking it in live. I said this last week. It's January, so it's kind of the dog days. Not a lot to look forward to. Games aren't as meaningful, although this stretch is against good teams, but being there just hits different. So go to our friends at Game Time. Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for events even easier. It filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets to find the best value. They do it for you, which is awesome. Bruins wise, again, I think this is the time. It's a good time to go. And again, with the flash deals, you hit on some of those flash deals right before the game. It's cheaper night, and you have the all-in pricing, which is awesome. So download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code CLNS for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Connor, what time is it?
Game time.
It is, in fact, game time. Game time. Young guys, my take coming out of the last 5 games is that you can absolutely trade Trent Frederick for assets. You can trade him for picks and prospects. It doesn't need to be a player-for-player swap. You know why? Because you can't tell me that a guy like Matt Patra or Georgi Merkulov can't come up and do like pretty much the exact same thing production-wise.
Yeah,
like
the way that
you have it in-house.
Yeah, exactly. The way that Frederick's playing right now, what do you have to lose? And it's something that, and I think Ty even mentioned it yesterday during the Oilers game, where like, we know what the Bruins have said in terms of why guys aren't being called up yet, of like, they have to learn to be better with managing the puck, have to, do all these little things that NHLers do. What have we seen from the guys on the NHL roster right now that is any different from what we've seen? Like, what do you see from the Oilers where, their first goal, it's 4 Bruins standing around doing nothing? If that was Merkulov or Lysell, to be banished to the Shadow Realm. Like, so what is this team doing right now that is so much, at a higher level than what we've seen that's keeping guys like Merkulov and Lysell and Patra away from this level? There's nothing. So I think when you look at the season, the way things are going, like, what do you have to lose at this point? Like, oh man, like Lysell and Merkulov, like I was not surprised that they didn't make any drastic moves going into Thursday's game because it's the mom's trip down to Florida. So I don't know if you're going to be giving guys the boot. But let's say that wasn't the case, right? Like, all right, you don't want Merkulov and Lysell and Patra out there because you got the Panthers who are physical and can bury you all across the ice. You got Tampa that is dangerous. Well, all right, so would you run the risk of, bringing those guys out and seeing what they can do, good or bad, and you lose 6-4? Or, what happens if you just stay with the status quo and you lose 4-1 instead? Like, all right, like at the end of the day, if this team is as flawed as they are, I want to see what these guys can have. I'd rather find out going into the offseason, like, all right, we can finally have the whiteboard. We can finally cross off. We can take the eraser and take out Lysell and Merkulov if they're not up to speed over a 20-game sample size, right? But if we're just going to keep on going with the same short-term solutions, like a guy like Wahlstrom, like, what are we doing if this is the year and this is how it ends, whether it's missing the playoffs or a first round 5-game exit? Let's see what these young guys can do. I'm tired of going through scenarios of what these guys could be, when if there's ever a time to do it, it's now.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest thing. And like, again, look, I want Wahlstrom to work. I think everybody wants Wahlstrom to work. There's, legit potential there, but there's been no production through, what is it? How many games has he been up here now?
8, 9.
8, 9. Like, again, I'm not saying that's everything, and he's on the third line, and the third line hasn't really produced all year. And he's had chances. He's had legit chances to score, no doubt. But like, you also need to see what you have in house. You got to see it at some point. And I know like Wahlstrom would be more Lysell because you're not putting Merkulov on the wing, and you're ideally not putting Patra on the wing either. You're putting Patra down the middle. But like, you've got to see what you have in these guys at some point. And as you've said, like if you get nothing out of this, if they're one and done in the playoffs, and they keep rolling out this lineup, this season will just be a complete failure. But if you could run this lineup out, finish pretty much in the exact same area, but see see what you have in Lysell and Merkulov, because I think what you have in Patra. Like, Patra's going to be back up here at some point. I think a lot of people, myself included, would want to see him up now. He's been great in Providence. You need that kind of dosage. I know you don't want to see him get crushed up here, but he's also getting crushed in the AHL. Still professional hockey players. Like, he's still going to get rough, sort of roughhoused. But like, I think if you could finish the year and see what you have in Merkulov and Lysell, it's like, all right, they got something there. Or, they don't have anything there. Like, I think that's the thing. And it's Merkulov's offensive ceiling is higher than most of the roster, right? So yes, there's some defensive zone issues. Yes, there's going to be some mistakes, but if you put him with a line that's in the top 9, let's say, not the fourth line, but first, second, or third, and you give him a good amount of minutes per game for, let's say, even 10 games in a row, he's going to produce a little bit. Like, most likely more than the guy that was in his spot before. And I don't understand the rationale there. I think keeping Frederick in the lineup and not benching him or healthy scratching him, to me, is chalked up to they don't want to lower his trade value. That's what that comes down to. Is, hey, see, he can be a center. Look, he's playing center for us. Third line center on a playoff team. Like, I think that's what's going into that. And I also think we're not near the deadline yet. I know like trade boards are coming out and this and that, and the rumors are flying and they're starting. But like, once you get to like a couple weeks away from the deadline, that's when prices really start to rise. My guess is you see him dealt around then. Yeah. I don't think it's going to be right now. I just don't. Because I think they want to wait for the price to rise. And if they can recoup a legit asset with that, you take it. You absolutely take it. But I think that's why he continues to be in the lineup in a prominent position.
Yeah, no, I agree. I just think that, as we mentioned before, but once you have the label of a guy that's being healthy scratched, other GMs take note of it. It's like, oh, what's going on there? And again, yes. So I wouldn't be surprised if he's in the lineup until there's some sort of resolution there.
Yeah. And again, I mean, also like, GMs can read, I think. There are lots of stories out there.
Now they don't have cap friendly. They're all just like, what the hell's going on?
What do I do? How do I do this?
Same.
But exactly. But there are, places writing that he's underperforming. So, I mean, GMs can figure that out for themselves. But I think getting scratched is sort of a different animal. I don't know. They're in a weird spot. And I think, there are people who are overreacting for sure, who want to, I get the comments we do all the time of blow the whole thing up, start over, all that. You're not there. It's good. It would take a lot for me to get to that point, but I do think you're in need of a retool. I do. And I think, even if they do okay on this Florida trip, which is not easy, and then they face Ottawa after the fact, I don't know, man. I don't know what, you can't, how do you add to this team at the deadline without giving up a first round pick, a future second round pick. Like, make your draft picks. That's the thing. Like, if someone wants to give you a lot for like a Merkulov, okay, fine. Like, sure. I just don't know who's going to do that. So
Yeah.
I don't know what you do at the deadline at this point. Like, I don't know. We'll see. We'll see. We will see what happens. I think we've touched on everything. I don't think there was anything we like completely missed.
The vibes are bad, Evan, I would say.
Not good. Not good vibes. Not good vibes at all. I thought there was one other thing that I wanted to mention before we left. I don't think there is. And if there is, then we can talk about it next week at another time.
Exactly.
Connor, what can the people look forward to from you over at the Globe and Boston.com?
Yeah, you can read my stuff over at theglobeandboston.com. We've covered every step of the way this Bruins season with recaps, features, columns, breakdowns, all that good stuff. And if you want to follow me on Twitter, X, whatever it's called, you can over at Conor Ryan, at Conor Ryan _93.
Go do all that. Go do all that. That's Conor Ryan. I'm Evan Marinofsky. You Poke the Bear listeners. Have a great rest of your week.